Have you ever wondered who you would become if no one was watching? If there were no expectations to meet, no approval to earn, no silent pressure to prove you were enough? And what if the moment you stopped chasing validation was the moment your real life finally began? The story starts late at night at a quiet apartment, city lights reflecting against tall windows. A phone screen glowing in the dark, notifications arriving one after another, each one asking for attention, agreement, response. Outside, cars pass slowly beneath streetlights. Inside, everything feels paused. He sits alone at a table scattered with unfinished ideas, notebooks half-filled, sketches abandoned mid-thought, plans that once felt urgent now resting quietly under a thin layer of dust. For years, movement defined him, every decision shaped by invisible audiences. Every achievement measured against reactions. Applause meant progress. Silence meant failure. Even happiness felt scheduled, something to be earned after enough approval had been collected, and at first, it worked. Opportunities grew. Conversations multiplied. People leaned in closer whenever he spoke. The world rewarded responsiveness. Being available, agreeable, impressive. But slowly, something subtle changed. The more approval he gained, the less certain he felt. Morning routines became performances. Smiles rehearsed. Opinions adjusted slightly depending on who was listening. Even rest felt uncomfortable, as if slowing down might cause people to lose interest. The strange part was this. No one ever demanded perfection directly. The pressure lived inside him, a quiet voice whispering, "Stay likable. Stay relevant. Don't disappoint." And so he kept going. Days blurred into meetings, messages, expectations. Nights became recovery periods, not for the body, but for identity. He would sit in silence, wondering why success felt strangely hollow, like applause echoing inside an empty room. One evening, while scrolling endlessly through praise and criticism mixed together, he noticed something unexpected. None of it lasted. Compliments faded within minutes. Criticism lingered longer than it should, and both controlled his mood equally. That realization unsettled him, because it meant strangers were quietly shaping how he felt about himself. Without ever knowing him, the challenge didn't arrive dramatically. There was no breaking point, no sudden collapse, just exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from working hard, but from constantly adjusting who you are. He began noticing small things, how often he checked reactions before trusting his own thoughts, how silence from others felt heavier than his own inner voice, how decisions were filtered through imagined opinions instead of personal truth. One night, he turned the phone face down. No announcement, no declaration. Just quiet. At first, discomfort rushed in. The urge to check, to respond, to stay visible. Approval had become a rhythm, and breaking rhythm feels unnatural. Minutes stretched longer than usual. The room felt unfamiliar without digital noise. Even the ticking clock sounded louder, like time itself was asking a question he had avoided for years. Who are you when nobody responds? And that's when the plot shifted. He expected loneliness. Instead, he felt relief, a small one at first, almost unnoticeable, like loosening a tight collar you forgot you were wearing. Thoughts slowed. Breathing deepened. Decisions suddenly felt lighter, as if they no longer needed permission. For the first time in years, he realized something surprising. Approval had never truly connected him to people. It had only connected him to expectations, and expectations change constantly, but something else began appearing in that. Silence, something steadier. Curiosity. Started asking different questions. Not, will they like this? But do I understand this? Not, how will this look? But how does this feel? The shift was subtle, almost invisible from the outside, yet internally, everything moved. The world didn't stop. Messages still arrived. Opinions still existed, but their gravity weakened. And slowly, an unfamiliar sensation replaced anxiety. Space to think without performing. Space to exist without explaining. Space to rediscover parts of himself that had been waiting patiently beneath years of approval seeking. But here's what no one talks about. When you stop chasing approval, Something unexpected happens, some people grow quieter, some connections fade, and suddenly, you begin to see who was drawn to you, and who was drawn only to the version of you that tried to please them. That realization was both freeing and deeply unsettling, because letting go of approval doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how the world responds to you, and he was only beginning to understand the cost of that freedom. The first thing he noticed wasn't peace, it was distance, not physical distance. The city still moved the same way outside his window. Morning lights still crept across buildings, and familiar routines continued without interruption, but conversations began to feel different. Replies came slower. Invitations became less frequent. The constant stream of small validations, likes, quick affirmations, reassuring reactions, quietly thinned out. At first, he assumed it was coincidence. People were busy. Life moved on. Nothing unusual. Yet deep down, he sensed something shifting beneath the surface. The backstory of his life had always been momentum. Being reachable, being agreeable, being the person who responded quickly, adapted easily, and rarely disrupted expectations. Now, without trying, he was doing something unfamiliar. He paused before answering. He declined without over-explaining. He allowed silence to exist where he once rushed to fill gaps, and silence made people uncomfortable. Morning scenes changed. Coffee steaming beside a notebook instead of a glowing screen. Sunlight landing on blank pages, waiting for thoughts that didn't need approval. The hum of the outside world fading into background noise as he sat longer with his own ideas. At first, his mind resisted. Old habits whispered, "You're falling behind. You're disappearing. People will forget you." The challenge wasn't external rejection. It was internal withdrawal. Approval had been a compass for so long that without it, direction felt uncertain. Decisions took longer. Confidence felt quieter, less dramatic, almost fragile. He began noticing how deeply approval had shaped his identity. Clothes chosen for impression. Opinions softened for acceptance. Ambitions adjusted to remain understandable to others. Even kindness, he realized, had sometimes been negotiation, an unspoken exchange for belonging. That realization stung because it meant parts of his personality weren't entirely his own. One evening, walking alone through nearly empty streets, he watched reflections move across store windows. People passed by without recognition or expectation. No one cared who he was, and instead of feeling invisible, he felt strangely free. That was the plot twist he never expected. Approval creates visibility, but anonymity creates honesty without an audience. Small truths surfaced. He noticed what genuinely interested him when no one would praise it. He stayed longer with thoughts that didn't sound impressive. He explored ideas slowly, without needing immediate results. Time expanded. Moments felt fuller. Even simple routines, cooking quietly, reading without interruption, watching rain slide down glass, carried a calm he hadn't experienced in years. But freedom carries a hidden tension, because as he changed internally, relationships began revealing their foundations. Some conversations felt lighter, more genuine. Others felt strained, as if the script had been altered without warning. People who once thrived on constant engagement seemed unsure how to interact with this quieter version of him. Questions appeared. "Are you okay? You've changed. You seem distant." He wanted to explain, but explanations felt unnecessary. Nothing was wrong. He was simply no longer performing. Familiarity. And that difference exposed something difficult to accept. Not everyone misses you. Some miss the comfort you provided them. The realization arrived gently but firmly. Approval had acted like glue, holding connections together through shared expectations. Without it, only authentic bonds remained strong. At night, he sat again by the window, city lights blinking endlessly below. There was less noise now, both digitally and emotionally. Yet a new uncertainty appeared. If approval no longer defined him, what would? The absence of external validation created a space that needed filling, not with achievement, but with identity. And identity, he discovered, doesn't return instantly. It rebuilds slowly, quietly, Often in ways invisible to others. He began trusting smaller signals, a sense of calm after certain decisions, a quiet resistance toward things that once excited him, an inner steadiness that didn't rise or fall with opinions, confidence. He realized wasn't becoming louder. It was becoming independent. Still, something unsettled him, because freedom from approval also removed excuses without expectations to blame. Every choice became fully his own, and ownership can feel heavier than pressure. One night, as he reviewed old messages and memories, he noticed a pattern he had ignored for years, a single thread connecting moments of approval, disappointment, ambition, and loneliness. It pointed toward one realization he had avoided. He hadn't just been chasing approval from the world, he had been chasing it from someone, specific, someone whose absence still shaped his decisions. Even now, an understanding why would change everything he thought he knew about himself. Have you ever realized that the person you were trying to impress isn't even watching anymore? The thought arrived quietly, almost accidentally. Late evening again. The familiar window, the city glowing below like a living constellation, traffic moving in patient lines. Somewhere in the distance, a train passing, steady, indifferent, continuous. He sat with old memories open on the screen, not dramatic memories. Just ordinary moments frozen in time, messages, photos, conversations that once felt important enough to shape decisions for years. He believed he was chasing approval from the world, but now, with distance and silence surrounding him, a different truth slowly surfaced. It was never everyone. It was one person. The backstory stretched further back than success, further back than expectations. A time when approval meant safety. When being understood felt rare and deeply valuable, there had been someone whose opinion mattered more than applause. Someone whose recognition felt like proof he was on the right path. And when that connection changed, slowly, quietly, without clear ending, the pursuit never stopped. He simply redirected it outward. Achievements replaced conversations. Recognition replaced closeness. Public validation filled the space where private understanding once lived. The details became clearer the longer he sat with the thought. Every milestone carried a hidden question. Would they see this? Every success whispered, would this finally be enough? He hadn't noticed it happening. Approval had become translation, an attempt to communicate, something left unsaid. The challenge now wasn't lost. It was realization. Because chasing approval from strangers suddenly felt less logical than admitting a deeper truth. He had never needed everyone's approval. He had been trying to resolve one unfinished emotional sentence. The room felt heavier as that understanding settled in. Outside, rain began falling softly, streaking the glass with slow-moving lines. Streetlights blurred into warm halos. The world softened visually, as if mirroring the shift inside him. He expected regret. Instead, he felt clarity. The plot twist came gently. The person he had been trying to impress had likely moved on long ago. More importantly, they were never asking him to become anyone else in the first place. The pressure had been self-created. A story extended far beyond its original moment. For years, he carried invisible expectations forward, building an identity around a question no one was still asking, and suddenly, something inside him released. Not dramatically. Just a quiet exhale. He realized approval loses power the moment you stop attaching it to healing the past. Silence returned, but now it felt different from before. Not empty, spacious. He closed the old messages, not out of rejection, but completion. Some chapters don't end with conversations. They end with understanding. He stood near the window, watching reflections move across wet streets. People walked beneath umbrellas, each carrying private stories unseen by others. For the first time, he felt aligned with that anonymity. No performance. No invisible audience. No emotional debt to repay through achievement. Just presence. And presence revealed something unexpected. Without approval as motivation, his actions slowed but deepened. Choices became intentional rather than reactive. Work felt quieter but more meaningful. Conversations became fewer, yet more honest. He began listening more than speaking, not because he lacked answers, But because he no longer needed validation through being heard, and that changed how people responded, some leaned closer, sensing authenticity they couldn't quite explain. Others drifted away, uncomfortable without familiar dynamics. Both reactions felt acceptable for the first time. Relationships weren't measurements of worth, they were reflections of alignment, yet a new question emerged if approval was no longer the goal. What replaces it? Humans rarely live without direction. Remove one pursuit, and another must take its place. He expected ambition to return stronger, but what arrived instead was quieter, a desire not to be admired, but to be understood. Not to impress, but to experience. Not to win attention, but to live without needing it. And that shift introduced a deeper realization still waiting beneath the surface, because letting go of approval doesn't just change how you see the past. It changes how you recognize love, connection, and belonging moving forward. And soon, he would discover that freedom from approval creates something unexpected, something many people spend their entire lives searching for without realizing it has already been within reach. What happens after the noise fades, and there is finally nothing left to prove? The question didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly in ordinary mornings, quiet evenings, and moments that once felt too small to notice. Life no longer rushed toward approval, and without that constant chase, time itself seemed to move differently. Sunlight lingered longer across the floor. Coffee tasted warmer when not interrupted. Silence stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like companionship. The backstory of his life had been built on motion, becoming, achieving, responding. Now, for the first time, he experienced something unfamiliar. Enoughness without confirmation. No announcement marked the change. The world didn't pause to acknowledge it. Headlines didn't shift. People continued their routines, unaware that an internal revolution had quietly completed itself. And that was the detail that mattered most. Freedom from approval is invisible from the outside. He began walking more without destination. City streets at dusk became reflections instead of pathways. Storefront lights glowed softly. Strangers passed by without expectation or recognition, and instead of wondering how he appeared to them, he wondered what stories they carried. Attention turned outward, not for validation, but for understanding. Conversations changed too. He listened fully now, without preparing impressive responses, without shaping opinions for acceptance. Words became slower, simpler, more honest. Something unexpected happened. People relaxed around him. Without performance. Others stopped performing too. Moments felt real in a way success had never provided. Laughter lasted longer. Silence between sentences felt comfortable instead of awkward. Even disagreements carried less tension, because being right no longer defined his value, yet the challenge appeared in a subtler form. Without approval driving decisions, motivation had to come from somewhere deeper. There were mornings when ambition felt quieter, days when productivity seemed less urgent. For a moment, he questioned whether losing approval meant losing edge, but then came the realization, the final plot twist. He hadn't lost ambition, he had removed fear from it. Before, action was fueled by proving worth. Now, action came from curiosity, from genuine interest, from choosing things that felt aligned rather than impressive. The energy returned. Calmer, steadier, sustainable. Work became expression instead of evidence. Relationships became presence instead of negotiation. Rest became restoration instead of guilt. And slowly, something rare emerged. Self-trust. Not loud confidence. Not certainty that everything would succeed, but a quiet belief that he could move through life without needing constant reassurance. One evening, sitting again by the window where this journey began, the city looked unchanged, yet entirely different because he was different. The phone rested nearby, silent. Notifications existed, but they no longer dictated emotion. Approval could come or go without altering his inner balance. He understood now, people's approval is temporary, but self-respect compounds quietly over time. And with that understanding came an unexpected warmth, not excitement, not triumph, But peace. The kind that doesn't demand attention, the kind that allows life to be lived instead of performed. He realized something many discover too late. When you stop chasing approval, you don't lose connection. You finally become capable of real connection, because only when you no longer need to be chosen. Can you truly choose others freely? The night deepened outside. Lights flickered across distant buildings. Somewhere, another person sat alone, wondering why approval never feels like enough. Maybe that person is listening now. Maybe they are standing at the same quiet edge, tired of performing, ready for something calmer but unsure what comes next. If that's you, consider this. What if nothing is missing from you at all? What if the exhaustion was never failure, only misdirected effort? And if this story felt familiar, you may notice another realization waiting just beyond it. The moment when silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling powerful, that story continues in the next reflection. The one about why the strongest people often choose quiet lives after loud success. Stay there for a moment. Let the silence settle. And when you're ready, continue with that journey.